Chapter 328, The situation is set. Inside the soul-extinguishing pass, a heavy drumbeat started to shake the very air. The drumbeats sounded like the heavy rumbling sounds of thunder, making even the grass in the plains tremble from the vibrations. The deeply asleep soldiers of Northern Wei were jolted awake, but found out that they were surrounded by screams of slaughter. The gate to soul-extinguishing pass suddenly opened up wide, and cavalry soldiers akin to the demons in the underworld shot out like arrows leaving their bows, bringing with them an aura as though they could pierce through everything in their way. They rushed deep into the Northern Wei encampment, reaping the lives of the soldiers as though heeding the summons of King Yama himself. At the point, Ling Tian led the demonic army, the guandao in his hands waving around him, creating violent winds as he brought bloodshed wherever he went. By the time the Northern Wei soldiers realized what was going on, Ling Tian was already dozens of feet into their encampment, leaving behind a trail of blood to indicate his path. Flanking his left and right were Ling Jian, Ling Qi, Ling Feng, and Ling Yun, all of them on horseback. They split into 4 different directions and slaughtered their way in as well. Further behind them were Wang Han and Feng Mo, guiding 2 large armies and rushing their way into the encampment from the side. Directly opposite from where Ling Tian's army rushed in, tens of elite troops also rushed in like tigers descending from a mountain, or dragons swimming through the oceans, brazenly killing their way in as well. There were about 20 of such groups, and all of them were using the exact same chisel-boring tactic, with the same amount of savageness, tearing into the unprepared Northern Wei soldiers. In this sudden sprint, the Northern Wei soldiers resembled a batch of helpless sheep waiting for the slaughter. Who would have thought that the almost 400,000 strong would be besieged by a paltry force of 10,000 soldiers, and with the weaker side actually taking the initiative to attack? Who would also have thought that a half-dead army could actually display such overwhelming strength? The most unbelievable thing was, where had Ling Tian actually come up with so many reinforcements? Wei Qingping and Qiang Shui Huan were jolted awake as well and immediately rushed out of their tents barefooted, without even putting on their battle mail. What greeted both of them simply caused them to be rooted on the spot without being able to speak a single word. Their entire camp was on fire, and from the flickering flames of the fire, they only saw the fast flitting shadows of their enemies, flashing around as though this was a barren ground. Recovering from his shock, Wei Qingping immediately called out at the top of his voice, "Pass the order! Pass the order! Request for reinforcements from the Western Han!" As though in reply to his words, a loud explosion came from the direction where the Western Han was located. The supply wagons of the Northern Wei army had turned into fireworks filling up the sky. Next, a series of ear-splitting shouts were heard as the 100,000 troops from Western Han rushed towards their Northern Wei ex-allies and started rampantly killing as though they were on drugs. From afar, the sounds of people screaming could be heard, "Rush into the camp and capture the Crown Prince of Northern Wei. Capture Wei Qingping alive." With tens of thousands of them all screaming the same command, how could it not be loud? At the moment, Wei Qingping was already scared to the point where his legs softened and he fell to the ground with a thump. Qiang Shui Huan ground his teeth hard as he stared towards the direction where the Western Han armies were making their way over, with a face full of hatred and killing intent. With the surprising turncoat from Western Han burning off the 400,000 soldiers' provisions, this had destroyed the last bit of hope remaining in the Northern Wei soldiers. Following a chant that started among Ling Tian's soldiers, "Those who surrender will be spared," everyone began to throw away their weapons en masse and kneel on the ground. "Your Highness Crown Prince." A few of Wei Qingping's bodyguards quickly ran to his side, but only saw him lying on the ground, paralyzed with fear. As for Shui Qian Huan, he had long disappeared together with the experts surrounding him. The few of them quickly grabbed Wei Qingping and galloped off, gathering a few of the die-hard soldiers to protect Wei Qingping without a care for their lives, escaping into the night. In the end, the majority knelt down in the middle of all the surrounding enemies begging for mercy. The outcome was set. Third Master Yu? Why are you here? Yang Kongku yelped out in surprise. Deep in his heart, he started to complain about the fact that this blockhead was still in the Ling residence. This only meant trouble. While Ximen Tian possessed a high cultivation, he was, after all, a single person and unable to change any outcome. However, behind him was the hegemon known as the number one family. Who would dare to provoke him? Old Yang, what kind of question is that? You mean that I, Third Master, can't be here? Ximen Tian seemed absent-minded as he pondered over Yang Kongku's words. This is my niece's husband's house. Do you expect me to fork out silver to stay at an inn when I can stay in his house? While I was staying at Smoky Thea Tower a while ago, that period was free of charge. I couldn't possibly stay there for the whole time. I still value my face, and since I'm not as rich as you, Old Yang, I could only come to my niece's husband's house to stay. Ximen Tian spoke matter-of-factly. This. Yang Kongku felt a little stupid at his explanation. I didn't hear of the Yu family having a marriage with the Ling family. Third Master, who is the husband of your niece? Oh, seems like he's called Ling Tian, that gigolo. Ximen Tian grinned as he spoke, as though he was extremely proud of him. Old Yang, while my niece's husband looks like a gigolo, his heart is actually really kind and he has many positive qualities. Furthermore, the wine in his place is really good. Ximen Tian smacked his lips unconsciously at the thought, absent-mindedly reiterating, really good. Mr. Yu. Long Xiang stood up from his emperor's carriage and warmly called out while smiling at him, Sky-bearing Empire is currently in a precariously unstable position, besieged by enemies external and internal. As the monarch of a country, to have allowed the land of my forefathers to fall to this state, Long Xiang really feels embarrassed and ashamed. Right now, the Ling family has a huge influence, having control over Sky-bearing's army, finances, and government. Their only heir Ling Tian is even more twisted, deceiving the country's monarch, barging into the imperial consort palace, and creating a multitude of troubles. Thus, I have no choice but to get rid of this blight. Mr. Yu is a virtuous and true hero, and I believe you will stand on the side of justice. As long as Mr. does not help either side in this battle, Long Xiang will be eternally grateful. You will receive good karma for this. Ximen Tian scratched his ear a little, a perplexed look on his face. This was not faked, as the flowery words of Long Xiang had caused this self-proclaimed talent of the world to be completely and utterly confused about his intention. The only thing he understood was the intent of capturing a criminal. Your words are resounding and lustrous, as though a candle had been lit to illuminate the area. They not only possess a kingly aura of doing as you please but have also been brought to the point of perfection. Listening to your words today is better than reading 10 years of a book. Ximen Tian shook his head as he replied in a scholarly manner, however, I didn't understand a single word you just spoke. After which, Third Master Yu thrust his chin up, a self-satisfied smile appearing on his face as though he had thoroughly impressed himself with his speech. Innately, he felt that his speech was inspirational and resounding. With all the flowery embellishments to his sentences, he was immeasurably self-satisfied. Shenru, whose face twisted into a weird expression as he whispered, Third Master Yu, our Emperor's words are to ask you to move aside so we can enter and capture the criminal. Criminal? Who's the criminal? Ximen Tian got a shock. He tilted his head and stared at Long Xiang, a hint of suspicion in his tone. Are you saying that you suspect my niece's husband of being a criminal? That's right. All in the Ling residence are now suspected of being criminals of my sky-bearing, and will not be pardoned. Long Xiang had a heavy expression as he announced, I hope that Mr. will not interfere. Sky-bearing has always maintained a cordial relationship with the Yu family. FKU. Ximen Tian suddenly burst out in anger, how could the husband of my niece be your criminal? And you even dare to talk about friendly relations? Friendly relations, your mother. In truth, Ling Chen had given Ximen Tian the task of stalling for time, but it seemed like he was not a good person for the task. Within such a short period of time, he had already flared up. The moment he shouted out, Long Xiong's face turned green. Shenru Hu hollered, "What guts? To insult my monarch, even if you're from the Yu family, there's only death awaiting you." Ha ha ha. Ximen Tian laughed out long and loud, suddenly staring straight at him, and shouted back, "What guts? To actually be so impolite in front of this third master. You might be the monarch of sky-bearing, but only death awaits you." Yang Kong sighed inwardly. The moment he caught sight of Ximen Tian, he knew that their relations were already finished. He had long begun to make preparations on how to avoid the wrath of the Yu family in the future, but for now, he had to ensure the destruction of the Ling family. If the Ling family did not go, it would be the Yangs getting annihilated. How could their long-lasting feud be something that a Yu family could alter? With a wave of his hand, a few martial arts experts shot forward, surrounding Ximen Tian. To go against him, sending ordinary soldiers would only lead to their deaths. Ximen Tian let out a guffaw as he exclaimed, "Good. This old man loves to fight the most." His fists suddenly shot out. A huge rumble suddenly sounded from afar, followed by huge flames appearing in everyone's sights. Billowing black smoke filled the skies. At this sight, Yang Kong's face suddenly had a drastic change. The sound and flames appeared from the direction where his Yang residence was located. Could it be? Yang Kong's face turned pale as he glanced towards the distance, a hint of doubt in his eyes. "While old Yang, there's no need to suspect anything, your worries are reality right now." A calm and indifferent voice sounded out. "Your rat's nest is completely finished." A white-robed teenager had unknowingly appeared on top of the Ling residence's door, his facial expression as though akin to a god looking down on the mortals, indifferent to their joys and suffering. That person was Ling Lei. Chapter 329, Completely Surrounded. At almost the same time, another loud explosion could be heard from the palace and a large cloud of smoke rose into the air. "Ha ha ha. How satisfying." A voice sounded and a snow-white figure landed beside Ling Lei. At the same time, 3 black balls landed in front of Long Xiong with a thick smell of blood emanating from them. As everyone looked over, they saw 3 heads with indignant countenances rolling on the floor. Yang Kong saw his vision blacking out as a wave of dizziness overcame him and a mouthful of blood sprayed out. His body began swaying in hopelessness. By his side, Yang Lei let out a roar as his eyes turned red and he began letting out a crazed roar, "Kill! Kill them all!" These 3 heads were the heads of Yang Kong's last son and his 2 grandsons. Not a single one of them managed to escape and they were all killed. Brother Diane is Brother Diane indeed. Even with the both of us joining hands, we were a single step slower. 2 teens appeared out of nowhere and a black sphere was thrown towards Long Xiong's sedan. Afraid that the sphere was lethal, Long Xiong's guard quickly deflected the sphere with a palm strike and it landed in front of the sedan. As Long Xiong looked towards the sphere, his body began to tremble. The decapitated head had long hair drooping down with a pair of fear-filled eyes staring at Long Xiong. She was the Empress, Yang Zhu. Long Xiong saw his vision darken with sweetness in his throat and fresh blood flowing down the corners of his lips. "Ah, Your Majesty, do you find her familiar?" That teen asked with a chuckle. What a peerless beauty. She was still elegant despite her old age. I almost couldn't bear to kill her just now. Oh, there are another 2 more over here. With a swing of his arms, another 2 heads rolled on the floor. Everyone could recognize that the heads belonged to the current crown prince and his younger brother. Just when Long Xiong and Yang Kong led their men to wipe out the Ling family had actually taken the initiative and destroyed the bases of both the Imperial and Yang families. Even the current Empress and Crown Prince were beheaded and presented to the Emperor. What a cruel method. Up until this point, No one from the Ling family had come out to say a single thing. However, they had used such a cruel method to display their determination. It's either your death or mine. There is no hope for reconciliation. This was the bloody method of the Ling family. Or perhaps, this was the bloody method which Ling Tian had trained his subordinates in. The 10,000 people present were immediately frightened. The cruel methods of the Ling family had shocked everyone present. If the Ling family was able to easily assassinate the empress in the tightly guarded palace, weren't they all nothing in the eyes of their enemies? All of them suddenly thought about how Ling Tian had risen to prominence so swiftly and displayed his cruel and sinister means. Witnessing how the scene in front of them was so similar to Ling Tian's means, the same thought surfaced in everyone's mind: the little devil isn't gone? Saving his father was no more than a farce? He is still in Skybearing and taking charge of the family? My goodness! The sound of footsteps sounded from afar, with a loud clamor and commotion sounding from all around. The walls of the houses to the sides were suddenly dismantled, with black bows appearing from the resulting ruins, aiming at all the soldiers present. In just a single instant, the whole place was filled with men. The roofs and windows were all filled with archers, with a person by their side holding onto a large shield. The glimmering arrows could be seen all around, aimed at the soldiers of the Imperial Army. Men could be seen appearing from all around, wielding their blades with a confident expression as though victory was in their grasp. As Shenru looked around, he realized that there were no less than 20,000 enemy soldiers. They were dressed in clothes of different colors as they blocked off the whole road. All of a sudden, the light from blades could be seen from all around. From afar, two burly men approached slowly on their horses. Even in the face of the elites of the Imperial Army, not a single trace of fear could be seen. Disdain could be seen in their eyes. Ling Lei and Ling Tian looked at each other with a smile, with the same thought surfacing in their mind: these two idiots. Thinking that the young noble was chasing them away, they bawled their eyes out when the young noble sent them to manage the violent Wind Gang back then, pleading to the young noble to retract his orders. But in just a few years, they already have such a heroic disposition. This disposition of theirs is something which the past them could never hold a candle to. From the south, another squadron of burly troops approached, and the one leading the front was black from head to toe like a piece of coal. The only white that could be seen on his body was probably the white of his eyes. He was Ling Five, who was in charge of Ling Tian's armament factory. From afar, he began to shout, "Everyone work together and kill this muddle-headed, tyrannical, and dog-shit emperor who kills the loyal." The troops he brought also began to echo, "Kill this inhumane dog-shit emperor." Their voices traveled afar as the troops all around began to roar, "Kill this dog-shit emperor! Kill this dog-shit emperor!" Long Xiang's face was pale as he looked towards Yang Kongkun and Shenru with fear in his eyes. At this moment, he was truly afraid. Both Yang Kongkun and Shenru were also the same. Despite being able to keep their cool, their pale appearances had already betrayed the fear in their hearts. None of them imagined that the Ling family, or perhaps the strength that Ling Tian had in Skybearing, was developed to such an extent. While all of them knew that the Ling family would not surrender so easily, and they knew that the strength of the Ling family was not to be underestimated, none of them had imagined that the strength of the Ling family was developed to the point they could overthrow the imperial family. It was too unexpected and out of all of their expectations. The soldiers from the Imperial Army looked at each other at a loss as the weapons in the hands drooped downwards. At this moment, none of them dared to make a move, and even their breaths were controlled and light. What would they do if the archers were to open fire from them, twitching their asses because of a fart? Merits and rewards may not be theirs, but their lives most certainly were. Even though the matters of the Skybearing Empire have nothing to do with me, this old man is enraged by the way Emperor Long Xiang kills his loyal subject in cruelty. I cannot watch by the side any longer. This old man is Nan Gong Tianlong from the Nan Gong family, and will announce to the world that our Nan Gong family will be allies of the Ling family forever. Even if our Nan Gong family were to be destroyed from the matters today, this old man will not have any regrets." The crowd split apart and Nan Gong Tian Long appeared with Nan Gong Tian Hu and hundreds of his Nan Gong family elites. They stood in front of the Ling residence with their faces stern, looking as though they were ready to give their lives. Ling Lei looked towards Ling Tian and shrugged his shoulders as the both of them sneered in their hearts, "It's too late." While Nan Gong Tian Long's plan to give them aid at their lowest point wasn't too bad, it was far too late. If the Nan Gong family members were to appear before the members of the violent twin gang appeared, and when there was only Ximen Tian standing in front of the Ling residence, regardless of whatever their intentions were, Ling Tian would definitely treat the Nan Gong family as their close ally from today onwards. However, just this moment of delay had a completely different meaning. Instead of sending coal in the winter, it was akin to embroidering flowers on brocade. It could even be said that they were seizing the opportunity to side with the victor. The Nan Gong family had lost their biggest opportunity to ally with Ling Tian. For the Nan Gong family to appear now, not only would there be no positive effects, they would only be revealing their true intentions to the many people present. Even Ling Lei and Ling Tian were able to see that the Nan Gong family was just siding the victor, not to mention Ling Tian. Currently, under the pressure of the many Ling family soldiers together with the unceasing number of reinforcements, the Imperial Army had lost all will to battle. Their bodies were all trembling as they lost the courage to even lift up their blades. They were no different from a flock of lambs ready to be slaughtered. In the Yang family, only Yang Konkun was still able to keep his cool, and his 3,000 Heavenly Blade troops were still able to put on an emotionless expression. However, their eyes were all filled with complete despair. As for the others, their faces were already ashen, with some of them lying on the floor paralyzed, with their muscles spazzing uncontrollably and white foam coming out from their mouths. They were all a pitiful sight to behold. All of a sudden, a loud voice could be heard from the Ling residence, "Miss Chen is here." Everyone's gaze shifted, with the soldiers of the Ling family revealing looks of respect. At the same time, Long Xiang's was also bewildered. "Miss Chen? Since when does the Ling family have a Miss Chen? Don't tell me." 40 burly men suddenly appeared and formed two straight rows in front of the Ling residence. They stood ramrod straight by the side, with a divine light shining out of their eyes and their bodies fit. It was obvious that they all had decent martial arts skills. Following which, a flurry of footsteps could be heard and a white-dressed lady walked out slowly. Following her were Mr. Qin, Meng Li Ge, the various managers of the Ling family, and the 20 blood iron warriors that Ling Tian left behind. Despite everyone present in the entourage being of considerable status, the gazes of everyone outside ignored all of them and were focused on this white-dressed beauty. It was as though it was only normal for them to be attracted to her. All of them could not help but agree that this beauty was the core of the many members present. She was the only lady who Ling Tian had recognized, Ling Chen. Ling Chen's face was calm as she walked out of the Ling residence slowly. It was as though a beautiful flower had bloomed in the noisy sky-bearing city. Pure, noble and unable to be defiled. It was as though looking at her from afar would make one feel a deep sense of inferiority. Chapter 330, Proclamation of Destruction. Even Long Xiang, who was coveting after Ling Chen, could not help but think to himself, "How can I deserve to own such a fairy? How can I defile her?" Ling Chen had never purposefully displayed a cold appearance, but everyone could feel a bone-chilling cold at this moment. Her gaze was like a 1,000-year-old glacier. Her gaze was filled with the chilly winds of winter. Despite standing there by the entrance of the Ling residence silently without doing anything, her bearing had already ruled over everyone currently present. It was as though she was naturally the motherly figure of the world, overlooking the world from high above. It was as though this was an elegance that she was born with. A peerless talent, a matchless beauty. Ling Chen, the lady who Ling Tian had used the present-day methods and knowledge to nurture, had finally revealed her splendor. This was a splendor that no princess or aristocratic daughter possessed. Who in the world could compare to her? None of them knew what Ling Tian had taught her over all the years. In terms of the scholarly arts, Ling Chen was in no way inferior to the various talents of the world. In terms of martial arts, she was slightly above the pavilion head of the first pavilion, Ling Tian. Furthermore, everyone from the Ling family courtyard was aware that this fragile-looking lady was the true controller of all information in the Ling family courtyard. Each and every message they sent had to be seen by Ling Chen. Each and every order that was given by Ling Tian was written by Ling Chen. All along, everyone knew that while Ling Tian seemed to be the number 2 figure on the surface, Ling Chen was the true individual who was only second to Ling Tian. After Ling Tian, the one in charge of the Ling family was Ling Chen. However, such a talented lady had willingly lived under Ling Tian's splendor. If not for the fact that Ling Tian wasn't in sky-bearing, Ling Chen would have definitely continued to conceal herself. She was not willing to, and she never would snatch any of Ling Tian's splendor. She was already used to silently staying behind Ling Tian, supporting him with all she had and enjoying each and every moment spent with him. However, when Ling Tian was not around and the Ling family had met with a grave crisis, Ling Chen stepped out without any hesitation. It was the first time Ling Chen revealed her splendor to the world. She was like a precious sword that had been buried for decades, stunning the world the moment it was unsheathed. While Ling Tian had already arranged all of this many years before, Ling Chen had fully made use of each and every source of strength Ling Tian left behind for her. She had deployed each and every asset at her disposal perfectly. Just this point alone was something that not many people were able to do. Emperor Long Xiang, Ling Chen's voice was both alluring but chilly. Her mesmerizing eyes emotionlessly looked at Long Xiang's frightened face. I am sorry, but the sky-bearing emperor no longer has the surname of Long. Her words sounded like thunder. Everyone was shocked upon hearing her words. It was as though their souls had received judgment in the afterlife. All of a sudden, they felt a strange feeling in their heart. All of a sudden, a commotion broke out in the crowd and dozens of men walked out. There were some who were calm and others who were trembling. There were even some who were completely pale with their eyes darting around nervously. They were the various officials of the present sky-bearing imperial court. Walking up to Long Xiang, the one in the lead was Minister Wei Zhengfeng. He then gave a bow to Long Xiang and actually didn't kneel down. Your Majesty has made a grave error and the situation in sky-bearing has already been determined. We hope that your Majesty will abdicate the throne. We hope that your Majesty will abdicate the throne. The officials shouted out together and bowed down. Long Xiang was thrown into disarray as he looked around in fright. General Shen. Sir Yang? No, father-in-law? Shenru, whose face began to contort and he took in a deep breath. With determination in his eyes, he shouted, Imperial Army, receive my orders. Before he could finish his sentence, a young commander suddenly charged forward and a blade was placed on his neck. With a low voice he said, General Shen, I am sorry. Shenru, who was angered to the point he almost vomited blood. Xiang Tai Tong, you actually betrayed me? His voice was not only filled with anger but also heartbreak. This young commander was a talent who Shenru treasured. Shenru, who had nurtured him without sparing any effort and treated him like a trusted aide. However, Shenru never expected that he would be betrayed by him. Xiang Tai Tong lowered his head for a while before raising it up again with calm eyes. General Shen, I have never betrayed you. I have a clear conscience. Shenru was filled with disbelief. Do you? Xiang Tai Tong said unflinchingly, that's right. I belong to the Ling family and to young noble Ling. I always have. His eyes were filled with a trace of pity as he looked towards Shenru. General Shen, I have always been grateful for the benevolence General had shown me, but I have my own position. I am called Xiang Tai Tong. Has General Shen never noticed anything? Shenru was taken aback for a moment before letting out a laugh. That's right. That's right. I was the foolish one. Metal that can ring, isn't that a bell one? Ha ha ha, what a joke. What a joke. My most trusted subordinate was the first one to betray me. Shenru Hu burst out into a maniacal laughter with tears flowing down his cheeks. He suddenly lifted up his head and said with vigor, however, I am not one who will bow down to my enemy. Xiang-Tai-Tong said coldly, General Shen has witnessed for yourself that the current imperial family is without hope. Even if the imperial army is still under your command, they are no more than lifeless souls. I hope that General will give the order to not let them sacrifice themselves for nothing. Is General Shen really that unwise? Shenru Hu continued laughing as though he did not hear a thing. He actually ignored Xiang-Tai-Tong completely. Ruhu. A mellow voice sounded and Duke-Ling walked out. Ruhu, you are feeling the heartbreak from your subordinate betraying your patronage and nurturing. Then how should this old man feel about you leading your army to attack my Ling family? Honored teacher. This disciple doesn't dare. A struggle could obviously be seen on Shenru Hu's face. Doesn't dare? You have already led your army to my doorstep and still say that you don't dare? Duke-Ling's body shook as his prestige emerged again. Is this old man an enemy to you as well? Are you going to kill your own teacher? Shenru Hu's face changed again as he got off his horse and knelt down. This disciple definitely doesn't have such intentions. If I have such intentions, may I be struck by lightning and die a horrible death. Ruhu had already decided that I will definitely protect teacher from harm even if I have to sacrifice my life. But now that the situation has changed and has tilted in this old man's favor, you want to protect Long Xiong again? Duke-Ling's beard trembled as he coldly said this. Rivulets of sweat rolled down Shenru Hu's face as he said with a struggle, Teacher. Ruhu is still a subject of sky-bearing. Darn BSD road. Colluding with the enemy to harm his own loyal subject. Heartless to his wife and daughter, and attempting to kill his meritorious subject. For him to perform such deeds, what right does he have to sit on the throne of an empire? Men, send this Ruhu to my side. This old man wants to see if he dares to go against this old man's words. If your heart is with Long Xiong, you can capture me for him. Duke-Ling began to roar. Xiang-Tai-Tong returned his blade to the sheath and said with cupped fists, General Shen, please. General Shen shut his eyes with tears rolling down his cheeks. All of a sudden, he shouted out, receive my orders. Put down your weapons. Following his words, Shenru Hu's body swayed as he sat down on the ground. Hearing such an order, the soldiers of the Imperial Army revealed a look of relief as they threw away their weapons and sat down like Shenru Hu. Currently, it was obvious that the outcome was set in stone, and Shenru Hu's words were akin to saving the lives of the many soldiers present. Seeing how Duke-Ling was able to take care of Shenru Hu, Ling Chen smiled and looked towards Yang Kong, family head Yang. What do you think? Yang Kong's face was ashen. Long Xiong could not fall. As long as Long Xiong fell, their Yang family would be destroyed as well. Gritting his teeth, he ordered, Heavenly Blade troops. Kill this switch for me. Ling Chen revealed a wide smile and it was as though the flowers had blossomed. Those present were all intoxicated and even Long Xiong had the urge to stop Yang Kong from issuing the order to kill her. After much difficulty, he managed to stop and saved himself from making a fool out of himself. Only Ling Dian and Ling Lei could not help but shiver as they witnessed Ling Chen's smile. Every time Ling Chen revealed such a smile, both of them knew that the 5 of them being tortured would come next. Now that she had revealed such a smile, who did she want to take care of? Whoever she chose to take care of, that person would definitely be in trouble. Without looking at the ferocious Heavenly Blade troops charging towards her, she suddenly shouted, receive my orders. All of you must aid our ally, the Nan Gong family, to uproot the vile Yang family. Help them to take revenge for their young noble Nan Gong La. May young noble La be watching this scene. As she said that, Her body flashed as she appeared behind the members of the Nan Gong family. With a smile, she said, "Family head Nan Gong, as the proverb says, a nation's enmity and family hatred. The Yang family and your esteemed family have an irreconcilable hatred. Now that the Yang family is akin to a toothless tiger, it is your best and final opportunity to take your revenge. Family head Nan Gong does not need to hold back, and all of you can go ahead and take revenge for your young noble. We will help family head to block the attacks from all other powers." Nan Gong Tianlong was completely dumbfounded. Chapter 331, Final Struggle. This crisp voice and clear words were no different from the voice of a devil in the ears of Nan Gong Tianlong. He never imagined that the means of this frail and feeble-looking lady were no different from her master, Ling Tian. She was equally cruel, with a blade hiding in her smile, holding on to a grudge while waiting for a chance for revenge. However, her vengeance was far too cruel. Nan Gong Tianlong cursed her incessantly in his heart. "Despite your Ling family having the upper hand at the present moment, you are actually asking the less than 200 men from my Nan Gong family to fight the 3,000 Heavenly Blade troops? Isn't this as good as sending us to our deaths? To think that you can righteously say that you are allowing us to get our revenge. You still dare to say that you will help us block all other powers other than the Yang family? How can you even have the cheek to say that? Will there be any other power in sky-bearing that will side with the Yang family? If we were to really fight the Yang family now, we will probably be lying dead on the floor before we can take our revenge." However, it was impossible for Nan Gong Tianlong to reject her, and he had no choice but to clench his teeth and accept what Ling Chen said. He had led the elites of his Nan Gong family to sky-bearing for revenge. It would be unreasonable for him to let his ally fight his enemy while he watched by the side and enjoyed the benefits. If such a matter were to spread, no power in the world would be willing to ally themselves with the Nan Gong family. If he hadn't tried to be smart and had supported the Ling family from the very start, or if he didn't attempt to come to the aid of the Ling family at the very last minute and had stayed out of this matter entirely, he would only be blamed by the Ling family afterwards. If he had chosen any one of the above two decisions, the experts of the Ling family would definitely take care of the Yang family now. At that time, even if they were to suffer some losses, their losses wouldn't be too huge. However, because Nan Gong Tianlong tried to act smart, he had forced himself to such a miserable state. He had forced Ling Chen to make such a decision, forcing their Nan Gong family to the tip of their enemy's spear. They no longer had any routes of retreat. In fact, Ling Chen's actions were also akin to warning the Nan Gong family, "Don't think that you are so smart. We can easily see through those little games of yours." During normal times, Nan Gong Tianlong could easily make a retreat and lead his enemies to the Ling family. Then, he could create chaos and use the opportunity to fish for benefits. However, the present situation would never allow Nan Gong Tianlong to make such a move. If he were to really do that, their Nan Gong family would definitely suffer a catastrophic attack from the Ling family. At that time, those from his Nan Gong family would probably perish before the Yang family. At this moment, fighting would mean a glimmer of hope and retreat would spell doom. Thus, they had no choice but to fight. Furthermore, they no longer had the chance to regret or be depressed. The Yang family's Heavenly Blade troops had already charged up to them. After the soldiers from the Ling family pretended to block them, they quickly created an opening with a signal from Ling Chen, letting the Heavenly Blade troops charge in. The next moment, the elites of both the Nan Gong family and the Yang family were tangled in a chaotic battle. With just a single exchange, both parties had suffered many casualties and fatalities. The Nan Gong family's sword god manual was an extremely tyrannical sword skill, and every move in the manual would definitely result in bloodshed. However, the Heavenly Blade troops of the Yang family knew that they would definitely perish after today. Thus, each and every one of them carried with them the resolution to drag someone along with them into death. At the very least, They wouldn't be suffering a loss and they could die a valiant death. Thus, the vigor and energy they displayed far exceeded the Nan Gong family. The battle was extremely miserable. While the men from the Nan Gong family were martial arts experts with their skill superior to the Heavenly Blade troops, with Nan Gong Tianlong and Nan Gong Tianhu being experts among experts, in this chaotic battle, their martial arts were not of much use. If they wanted to escape, it wouldn't be too difficult of a matter. However, if they wanted to fight the Yang family head-on, even Ling Tian himself would probably find it to be an impossible task. However, Nan Gong Tianlong and Nan Gong Tianhu couldn't escape. They couldn't even retreat. They had no choice but to clench their teeth and hold their ground. The moment they escaped and created chaos, their Nan Gong family's 100 years of foundation would definitely be uprooted by Ling Tian. This was something that Nan Gong Tianlong was certain about. Regardless of whether or not Ling Tian was able to save his father, it was certain that Sky Bearing had already fallen into the hands of the Ling family. With this newly gained strength, why wouldn't the Ling family think of expanding their influence? Thus, their Nan Gong family must definitely not give the Ling family any reason to wipe them out. Perhaps, even if they didn't do anything wrong, Ling Tian might still find an excuse to create trouble. At this moment, Nan Gong Tianlong regretted his decision to the point his intestines turned green. Why did I have to act smart and try to seek benefits from both sides? I have really dug my own grave. It was as though the Heavenly Blade troops placed little emphasis on their own lives. Even if they could only inflict a shallow wound on their enemy at the expense of their lives, they would charge forward without any hesitation. Even if they would only be able to slow down the speed of their enemy's sword, they would block their enemy's blade with their chest without any hesitation. Such a way to battle could be said to be almost crazy. While the men of the Nan Gong family were martial arts experts, the Heavenly Blade troops of the Yang family were no pushovers. Furthermore, their opponent was willing to use 5 men in exchange for an enemy's arm and another 10 lives in exchange for their enemy's head. Such a bloody way to fight was no different from committing suicide to kill their enemy. Facing such a crazy attack, almost 100 men from the Nan Gong family had died after a mere 10 minutes. All the members of the Ling family watched this scene emotionlessly as though they were watching a play. As for the troops of the Ling family, they stared at the remaining men from the Yang family and the Imperial Army warily as though they were facing a powerful enemy. Sister Chen, Ling Dian approached Ling Chen stealthily. It wouldn't be a good idea to drag this matter any further. Wouldn't it be better for us to take care of that dog-shti emperor first before watching this show in peace? We should be careful of a change in situation. Ling Chen's frosty eyes looked at the battlefield of the Nan Gong family calmly as she shook her head. Wait for a while longer, there are still many experts of the Nan Gong family left. If we were to take action now, the remaining experts of the Nan Gong family would definitely seize the opportunity and retreat successfully. If that's the case, our previous plans will have gone to waste. All of our efforts would go to waste if we were to make a hasty move now. As for Long Xiong, do we still have to worry about him now? Ling Dian felt a sudden chill run down his spine. At that moment, he felt as though the one he was talking to wasn't Ling Chen but Ling Tian himself. This was completely like what Ling Tian would have done. He couldn't help but be shocked at that thought. Since when did Sister Chen become so similar to young noble? Is this still the usual Sister Chen who was afraid of seeing blood? None of them knew that when Ling Tian went to capture Shui Qianru in the pine forest, he had already felt the impending crisis in Sky Bearing. Therefore, he had already handed over all his forces to Ling Chen's control. At the same time, he had also emphasized the way she should handle the Nan Gong family. In truth, Ling Tian also felt worried about the Ling residents when heading to the battlefield. While he was certain that the strength he left behind was enough to handle any changes, he was wary about the Nan Gong family. He was afraid that the Nan Gong family would strike them at their lowest point and aid Long Xiong to wipe out their Ling family. If Ling Tian knew that the intentions of the Nan Gong family were just to take sides with the victor, he might have given Ling Chen a command to let them off. With Ling Chen's wisdom, her ability to strategize was already no less than Ling Tian. However, her kind personality was the one thing that Ling Tian was concerned about. Ling Tian was afraid that she would suffer losses because of her personality. He had reminded her over and over again that she didn't need to take personal action if something were to come up. Instead, she just had to give the command to let others handle it. As for how the various parties were going to handle it, that was not something that was her concern. Such a method was custom-made for Ling Chen. When Ling Chen had issued the orders today, she never expected the outcome to be so bloody. However, Ling Chen became even more calm as she saw the bloody scenes in front of her. Since things had already turned out like that, she couldn't shy away from the matter because of her softness. If she were to take a step back at this moment, Ling Tian's plans and efforts would definitely go to waste. She couldn't let Ling Tian down because of a moment of soft-heartedness. Thus, Ling Chen chose to face everything bravely at this moment. At this moment, Ling Chen was reminded of something that Ling Tian said: "You must be vicious to your enemy and destroy them by the roots. Regardless of age or gender, you must not leave a single one of them alive." While Ling Chen might not be able to bring herself to kill a single one of them, giving out a command certainly wouldn't be an issue. While such actions were no different than living in denial, an ancient saying was extremely true: what the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. Ever since the courtyard had been established, there were hundreds of such orders that had been given from Ling Chen's mouth. In just a short moment, the Nan Gong family had been reduced to a miserable state. Nan Gong Yu had suffered a slash to her arm with half her body stained with blood. Nan Gong Tian Hu and Nan Gong Tian Long were both covered in blood as well and were panting heavily. As for the other Nan Gong family experts, there were only 30 or 40 of them left fighting to the death. Up until now, Nan Gong Tian Long had not even pleaded for any help. As the head of the Nan Gong family, he had the pride and arrogance of one. With just this alone, everyone present couldn't help but admire his strong will. In the battle, the Heavenly Blade troops of the Yang family had tried many times to charge at the Ling family's formations but were all killed before they could even approach within 30 feet. Chapter 332, Destruction of the Yang Family. Witnessing another 7 members of the Nan Gong family fall into pools of their own blood, filled with innumerable sword slashes, and turning into minced meat in a flash, Ximen Tian, who was standing by the side, could bear it no longer. With a loud roar like a tiger, he rushed into the battlefield, the great sword in his hands waving around wildly, carving out a circle around him. He could not bear the loss of talents the most, and decided to jump into the battle. Besides, the Heavenly Blade troops would not care if he was the third in command of the Yu family or not, or whether he was an esteemed Xiantian realm expert. They would just throw themselves forward without any hesitation. Ling Chen sighed. For someone of Ximen Tian's character, it was only a matter of time until he interfered. However, since he had come into the scene, her plans could not follow her optimal schedule any longer. While Ximen Tian was a Xiantian realm expert with rich battle experience, the battlefield was after all an unpredictable place. If anything happened to him, how would Ling Chen account to Yu Bingyan? As such, Ling Chen raised up her right hand. Those of her side, upon seeing this, would know that she had set the order for complete and utter annihilation of the other party. Shouts sounded from all 4 directions, followed by the swift sounds of wind breaking as shaft after of black-colored spears rained down upon the Heavenly Blade troops, without any sign of stopping. The closely clustered spears seemed to block off every single ray of light from the skies as they descended. Under the light of the torches, the blood spurting out from various injuries took on a rose-red hue, accompanied by the lengthy screams of the victims in pain. A multitude of heavenly blade troops had rushed over without concern for their lives, but in an instant, they had become fodder for Ling Lei, Ling Tian, and Ximen Tian. The rain of spears continued for a good hour, to the point that while the spears were still raining, there were no longer any more screams of pain below. After a halt, command from Ling Lei, all the soldiers on duty straightened themselves in attention. Not a single noise could be heard then. Such a huge area, but without a single survivor. The 3,000 members of the Heavenly Blade troops were uniformly turned to human mush, completely unrecognizable. Only now did the perpetrator of this entire event, Ling Chen, appear. Upon seeing the gore in front of her, her face blanched as she wobbled a little, before forcing herself to speak to Ling Lei, "Get all your men to disarm and advance into the palace," while reassuring the public. "As for Yang Kongkun's and Long Xiang's groups, we'll wait for the young noble to make a decision." The moment she finished, she quickly returned to the residence before throwing up incessantly. Yang Kongkun stood mutely on the spot, seeming like a living corpse as he stood there. At this moment, anyone could see the despair in his eyes. Suddenly, he burst into a fit of insane laughter. Staggering along, he pointed to Ling Zan and laughed, "Old Ling, it seems like I, Yang Kongkun, have lost. I've completely been defeated. Ha ha ha." Ling Zan sighed and waved his hands to stop Ling Lei, who was about to pounce on Yang Kongkun. He solemnly declared, "That's right, you've lost. Old Yang, you have no way to rise back up again." Yang Kongkun gave a hollow laugh, as his face regained some semblance of calmness. "While I might have lost, I still want to know. How was I defeated? I planned far ahead, every step carefully constructed for a whole 20 years in secret. However, while I was beaten, I still don't understand it at all, and I can't rest in peace without knowing. I believe that my schemes and plots were not able to be easily seen through, because even my wife knows nothing about them. So tell me, in whose hands did I lose? Was it that I've never been able to tell your true colors? Or was it that I've always been making a mistake?" Ling Zan slowly shook his head, his eyes full of pity. "Old Yang, the one who has defeated you is not me, but my grandson, and my only grandson, Ling Tian. 3 years ago, he was already waiting for you to carry out this plan to ambush you. Which meant that, 3 years ago, Ling Tian already had absolute confidence in routing you. However, you delayed your plans by 3 years, so how could you not lose?" "Ling Tian? 3 years ago?" Yang Kongkun called out in disbelief, "Stupid old Ling, are you trying to swindle a dying man?" Ling Zan shook his head instead, coldly remarking, "Old Yang, why would this old man still lie to you at this time? While you had been meticulously planning for the past 20 years, your target in the end was just my Ling family and within Sky Bearing. From the start, my Tanner never saw you as an opponent, for his goal was merely to use you as a stepping stone to conquer the entire world. Compared to him, how could you still think of victory? But you need not feel depressed, as even I was unaware of my grandson's ambitions. This is what is called ambition does not restrict itself to the old. Turns out that you were really muddle-headed for your whole life, to not even know that your grandson was so outstanding, with such foresight." Yang Kongkun stood in shock for a while, before he finally realized. He let out a hearty laugh, "That's right. How could I be compared to someone who wants to hold the entire world in his grasp? While I am running along, he is already flying in the sky. How could I not lose? Ha ha, this old man admits his defeat wholeheartedly. I'm no longer unresigned to it." Clang! Yang Kongkun withdrew his sword from the sheath, and it rippled like the water on a river. Holding it before his chest, he gazed at it with a sentimental expression as he muttered, "This old man has lived for a long time, spending a lifetime warring under the heavens. I've always believed my intelligence to be superior, that there was no one my equal. Even when I was older and had to resort to planning instead of being in the front lines, I always made sure I made no mistakes due to negligence, but to think that I've lost to a boy of 15-odd years, to the point that I have no way to make a comeback. Ha ha ha, what a joke. Respect, I've only respect for him. After his laugh, he threw his head back to the heavens and screamed, "From today onwards, there will no longer be a Yang family." And blood spurted. He had chosen to commit suicide. He hit the ground with a straight back. Even in death, he chose not to bow. Ling Chen gave a deep sigh. After all, this was still a person whom he had fought with for over a decade. He turned his back, unable to keep watching, but sudden screams alerted him once again. Turning his head, he saw a group of archers shooting arrows into the remaining Yang family members, and before those kneeling Yang family members could escape, they had all been killed. "You!" Ling Chen roared, "since they have already surrendered, why are you not sparing them?" On one side, Ling Lei and Ling Tian bowed as they replied, "Elder Ling, please forgive us." Young noble said that even a prairie fire cannot destroy the grass, it grows again when the breeze blows. The Ling and Yang families have too much hatred between them, and against the Yang family, if we were ever to move, we have to pull them out by the roots. We cannot leave behind any possible cancers. As he spoke, he waved his hands, "Hurry up, why are you guys so slow?" Ling Chen was furious to the point that he could not speak. While he was aware of such a reason, Old Man Ling was still an emotional person at heart and could not bring himself to do such a thing. He could only sigh loudly and return to the residence, while saying, "Kidru Hu, come and accompany this old man for a talk." Dawn had broken. Ling Tian led his troops together with the surrendered soldiers, creating an eye-catching sight and filling people with a strong sense of desolation. On the battlefield, wisps of smoke could still be seen, quickly dispersing under the gentle morning breeze. It resembled the lost souls of soldiers, being carried to another place of paradise for them, or it could actually be the hopes and wishes of parents and wives towards these men, disappearing with the wind, helplessly vanishing into nothingness. Ling Tian's snow-white robe had splotches of blood everywhere, as though there were plum blossoms growing on his robes. It was only at this time that the battle had ended. The clearing of the aftermath had just begun. Han Taizhuan could be lauded as a military genius of his time. He did not display any indecisiveness, immediately choosing to chase after the escaping Wei Qingping. Because they had discussed the spoils earlier, that all captive and war horses would belong to Ling Tian, Han Taizhuan could only pioneer a new territory in the northern Wei if their imperial family collapsed. He wanted to rely on his role as a military servant to obtain a merit so huge that his name would be immortalized forever in the lands of Western Han. Thus, he did not bother with any wounded or captives on the field, charging forward with only the intent to eliminate Wei Qingping, while capturing all the northern Wei cities along the way. Never had he been embroiled in such a thrilling battle, where he had the absolute advantage. Northern Wei had thoroughly lost this time around, ending with Wei Qingping escaping in defeat. The remaining escaping survivors of the Northern Wei army did not even add up to 20,000. A 400,000 strong army, reduced to less than a tenth, was as good as being defeated. Han Taizhuan, who was looking for even more profit, had chased them down all the way, ambushing at mountain passes and taking even more lives. From today on, in the stage that was the Heavenly Star continent, there would never be a Northern Wei flag. In this battle for supremacy, Northern Wei had become history, never again to be seen as a threat. The leftover provisions of the Northern Wei were all taken by Ling Tian, and just the leftover weapons were enough to fill a good 500 wagons. Furthermore, each wagon was so heavy that it required 4 horses in order to move them. If one were to look at it from afar, it would seem like a field of spears and swords on the plains moving. After further arrangement, the 200,000 captive soldiers were split into 20 groups, each group consisting of 10,000 men. Ling Tian knew that time was pressing, so he only called his trusted aides to his side, commanding them, "You guys are to take 10 wagons of weapons each, and 10,000 of the surrendered soldiers each with 3 days' worth of rations. How to settle their meals will be completely up to you. There must definitely not be any mutiny, and neither are any of you allowed to kill them indiscriminately. They will all be under your direct command in the future, so how you are going to lecture them will be up to you." Lastly, Ling Tian emphasized this point, "I don't care what methods you use. In 1 year, I want to see the most loyal and battle-worthy soldiers before me. Right now, all of you are to settle your teams and bring them back to your own bases. Wait for my next command." Chapter 333, Push Beyond One's Ability. The moment Ling Tian finished speaking, he was greeted with sour expressions. This was no easy task. Among those present, a majority were secretly recruited by Ling Tian 3 years ago and sent out to develop their own strength. In these 3 years, the largest group one of them had accumulated was only 10,000 strong. Some of them did not even have a head count of over 1,000. They might be elites, but there was a limit to how large a group they could sustain. So how could they afford to feed another 10,000 mouths? Furthermore, these people were not even part of their original group, and with such a large group, were a mutiny to happen, it would be a deadly scenario. Even if everything went according to plan, to get enough rations was the next problem. A tall and sturdy youth with bushy eyebrows stood up, saying, "Young noble, this might be a little difficult. If we were to inflate our members with 10,000 extra people suddenly, I really can't find any way to do it. However, if the courtyard can help and supplement a bit." Feng Mo jumped up in shock, and fearing that Ling Tian would agree, immediately stood up and interrupted, "What nonsense! You guys have only gotten 10,000 each, but the courtyard is going to pick up the other 120,000 stragglers to form an army. We're also scrambling to find an answer, so how would we have the capability to help you guys?" As he spoke, he exchanged glances with Wang Han. Both of them had a head covered with cold sweat. Even with the original amount of 20,000, the two of them were already hard-pressed. Right now, the 20,000 had actually increased to 120,000, and this caused their heads to swim. The youth unhappily complained, "What does 120,000 mean to you guys? With young noble by your side, let's not talk about 120,000 soldiers, even if it were 1.2 million, or even 12 million, there would not be a problem. But who is there to support us?" Ling Tian's face sunk as he shouted, "Stop arguing." The crowd gave each other a look and sat back down in embarrassment. Ling Tian indifferently remarked, "Who's supporting who? You guys only have yourself to support. If you need someone to solve every single problem for you, then you guys will never grow. Think it's tough to support 10,000 troops on your own? Useless things. Right now, I'm telling you guys, whatever you guys do, I want this matter settled properly. Whether you do it through robbing or setting up a business, 1 year later, I want to see a company that is up to my mark and not a ragtag bunch of shtheds. If you guys can't achieve that, then you can accompany them and starve to death." He stood up as he serenely continued, "This is also your final test. If you are unable to carry out such a task, then what sense does it make to talk about accomplishing major events? With this event, we really don't have that much time anymore. This ambush has given my Ling family a terrible blow, but with danger always comes opportunity. Through this war, we've received a large number of soldiers. But there will be more troubles ahead. With Chenner holding the fort back there, the matter at Sky Bearing should be settled. However, it will be impossible for everything to return back to normal in a short amount of time. We need to have a change in our point of view and look at the world, having Sky Bearing just as a base of operations. As such, the resources from Sky Bearing now and in the future will not be given to you guys. You have to find a way out on your own. Understand?" All of them uniformly stood up and expressed their assent. Seeing the worry line still etched on their faces, Ling Tian laughed. Don't you guys know that in this world, other than a business, there's still another way of getting rich quick? It's called being a Robin Hood, robbing the rich and giving to the poor. So long as you guys can protect yourself and your men, turning them into elite soldiers to conquer the world in the future, you can do anything you want. The path is yours to forge. And remember, if you fall, never complain. Finishing this sentence, Ling Tian took out a jade bottle from his bosom and gave everyone present a great cyclic pellet. He instructed them to ingest it after they return and go into closed-door cultivation. However, they had to be wary of any potential dangers while cultivating. After that, he no longer spoke and waved his hands, dismissing them all. These people were all under the direct command of Ling Tian, and every one of them was a leader personally groomed by him. They were of the same batch as Ling Chi, Ling 19's group. While they might have their own names now, but their real names, or more accurately, the name that showed their young nobles' recognition of them, was the number Ling Tian had given them that year. It was an incomparable honor for any one of them sitting there. That year, other than Ling Yun, Lei, Diane, Qi, and Ling Feng, the rest of the 50 were all spread out over the continent like a web by Ling Tian, carrying out the order to live undercover. Right now, there were only 8 of the brothers present. If all 50 of them were to be gathered in the same spot, what sort of insane strength would they possess? Standing on the higher ground and watching the 8 separate groups kick up dust as they disappeared from the grass plains, Ling Tian had only a bitter smile and was lost in his thoughts. Yesterday night he had already received a letter from Ling Chen. Knowing that the matters in Skybearing had been settled, a good part of the weight in his heart had also lifted. Now, he had begun to reconsider his situation. With the finances the Ling family would obtain after taking over Skybearing Empire, it would be a piece of cake for Ling Tian to take care of all these people. But the problem was, he did not wish to do so. This world was too big, too complicated. Ling Tian could already sense the alarm that would spread across the continent the moment war started. If it was merely comparing intellect as well as perseverance, Ling Tian would gladly welcome each and every challenge, for he was not alone. With Ling Chen and Mr. Qin, as well as the military officers on Ling Zan's side, he had full access to their expertise. He had not even included Meng Li Ge, who was staying at his house due to a lack of residence for himself. While he did not expressly state that he would aid Ling Tian, he had also never once rejected him every time Ling Tian approached him to ask for assistance. Even when it came to comparing martial strength, Ling Tian too never feared anyone. This even included the Jade of Heavenly Star and Water of Heavenly Wind. Ling Tian estimated that with his and his subordinates' skills, they could possibly already stand against an aristocratic family. If they were to stick to assassinations, even hegemons like the Yu family would suffer greatly before them. Hence, Ling Tian had no fear. Rather, what Ling Tian lacked now was actually a general who could survive on their own. A true general that only answered to him. The moment war breaks out, every area on the continent would be filled with battles, with the various empires vying for supremacy. As the supreme leader, Ling Tian could not possibly be there on every single battlefront, guiding and leading his troops. Even if he had the Monkey King's skills, it would still not be enough. As for passing the baton over to Ling Zhou to go to war, or allowing the various generals in Skybearing to go in his stead, let's not talk about whether they even have the ability. Even if they did, Ling Tian would still never allow it to happen. Thus, he had to train up a batch of capable brothers who not only possessed a set of exceptional martial skills but could also manage tens of thousands of soldiers and have unswerving determination, a great general who could stand on his own. Becoming a general was easy, but to be able to judge the hour and take stock of the situation, capitalizing on advantages and falling back when unfavorable, one had to have real skill. Ling Tian was already hard-pressed for time to nurture them, so right now, even if he had to push them beyond their capabilities, He had to squeeze this potential out of them. Ling Tian had always lived by the idea that in the world there was no such thing as a genius. All geniuses, as well as successful people, were merely humans who had their potential squeezed out of them. A person who grew up with a silver spoon and never faced hardship would never amount to anything great. Unless you had traveled through time and space to reincarnate, then maybe you would still have that sense of danger. Once a person is forced to a certain extent, in order to avoid being buried under the sands of time, he will suddenly burst forth with tremendous potential. Only this way could one succeed. Of course, if the person is forced to his limits but cannot display his potential, then that can only be his fate. Those that are fated to survive will naturally live, and those who cannot. That's life. There will definitely be people who are unlucky enough to be unable to display their potential. Heroes are always born in troubled times. Without an insane ambition and resoluteness to couple with your chivalry, then you can just go ahead and die. Or to put it bluntly, you'll die sooner or later. This point was made perfectly clear to Ling Tian. Having a chivalrous attitude was something Ling Tian had long scoffed at even in his previous life. In his point of view, that was merely being soft-hearted. As such, he had to drill this concept into all the brothers under his direct command. The best way to save someone was just to let him save himself. Allow the person to face their own difficulties, and emerge from it a stronger and better person. While Ling Tian could not bear to force his brothers to such an extent, he was already forced into this corner. Furthermore, Ling Tian believed in his judgment. That year, out of the tens of thousands, waves after wave of people were eliminated to the point that there were only 50 left. If this 50 were to be unable to live up to his expectations, then it would only mean that he had poor foresight. Feng Mo's subordinates turned out to be surprisingly efficient, completing all their tasks before the sun had fully risen. The surrendered soldiers were all already being led into some abandoned barracks in Nine Swallow City, and all the carcasses of the war horses were buried. Looking back at the battlefield, one would only see patches of dark red soil left, as well as small pockets of piled-up soil. The majority of the group had already entered the pass, with only Ling Tian remaining where he stood. Ling Tian folded his arms behind his back as he stared at the plains, as though waiting for something. Looking at the quiet plains in front, he felt the urge to sigh deeply. Chapter 334, Splitting Up with Ximen. The huge group of soldiers and war horses had already successfully entered the pass, leaving Ling Tian alone. Gazing at the plains, he only felt an intense desire to let out a sigh. At this same time next year, probably even the soil mounds will have disappeared, right? If that's the case, then who will still remember the intense killing done on this piece of land? Who will remember that a once powerful country was reduced to nothing here? And as for the forest of white bones buried below the soil, how many of them still have a beautiful wife at home looking out of the door every day, pining for them? How many of them will appear once again, in the dreams of their lovers at midnight? Those pitiful bones left to wander along the side of the river, while their wives at home still dream of their return. 1. Shaking his head, Ling Tian dispelled his current thoughts to the back of his head. He couldn't help but laugh, sensing how easily he was emotionally triggered by the scene in front of him. Death and turning into bleached white bones, he of all people would understand it best. From afar came the sounds of galloping horses, resounding like muffled thunder. All the soldiers in the Ling army immediately heightened their wariness, raising their heads. Ling Tian squinted, looking into the dust clouds from afar while keeping a relaxed expression. The newcomers only numbered a few, probably 1,000 at most, but one could see that every single of them had valiant and fierce looks. Undoubtedly, they were all elite soldiers. Seated at the front was a youth clad fully in black. However, no one noticed that the moment he caught sight of Ling Tian from afar, a gleam passed through his eyes, and in that instant, his face took on a weird expression. "Who are the newcomers?" "Ah." Ling 19 opened his mouth to ask. He was seated in a circle together with Ling Qi and Ling Yan. As for Ling Jian and the rest, they had disappeared a short while ago. Ling 19 had taken the initiative to stand up and open his mouth, but the moment he spoke, he felt as though someone was choking him by his throat, rendering him unable to speak. Ling Qi stretched out a hand and pulled him back, shooting him a warning look while whispering, "Don't speak, let the young noble deal with this." Those that were about to react the same way as Ling 19 caught themselves and lowered their heads, not daring to speak. "Impudence! Who goes there? How dare you show such disrespect in front of this young noble? Hurry and dismount!" Ling Tian shouted out with an icy expression. Within his voice could be heard a trace of displeasure, as though he was unhappy at this group of people for breaking his own mental state. "And who might you be?" The black-robed youth also had on a cold expression as he sternly replied, "Where is General Han Taizhuan? This young noble has something to ask him. Quickly bring me over." As he spoke, he raised the horsewhip in his right hand, attempting to establish dominance. However, for reasons unknown, his finger trembled a little, causing the horsewhip to deviate and point at Ling Yan's chest instead of his face. This reduced the domineering effect he hoped to achieve. "General Han Taizhuan?" A smile appeared on Ling Tian's face. "Are you from Western Han? This young noble in front of you is the youngest master of the Ximen aristocratic family." A person beside the black-robed man tried to butter him up. "He is the last young noble left in the Ximen family. Hurry up and pay your respects." "The Ximen aristocratic family? Ha ha ha." Ling Tian laughed so hard that tears rolled down his cheeks. "So it's that entire family of people with homosexual tendencies, preferring huge and muscular males? What a resounding and prestigious name. The last time, the heavens witnessed the #1 talent of the Ximen family performing, and the scene is still vivid in everyone's minds. Now hearing this really brings back memories. Haha. I wonder if this last young noble is also interested in this type of performance. If that's the case, then I'll pray that you just never see me in that way. You're seeking death." On that black-robed youth's side, a group of men were enraged and immediately drew their swords, rushing up. However, the youth's hand rose up, halting them in their tracks as they obediently returned back to their stations. While that youth was young, he had a certain sort of influence within that group. While their side was already on the verge of snapping, the strange thing was that by Ling Tian's side, everybody seemed to have seen and heard the exchange, but all remained sitting by the side without batting a single eyelid. Were they that confident of this guy? The black-robed youth breathed in deeply, a strange light flickering in his eyes as he cupped his fists, saying, "This one here is Ximen. May I request for this noble's name? Might I know how my family has offended you?" He was directly in front of Ling Tian, but deliberately did not lower his voice, showing that he had a backing that was as formidable as Ling Qi and group. By the side, Ling Qi and group's faces twitched when they heard, but their faces remained passive. Ling Yan narrowed his eyes as he looked at Ximen. The expression in his eyes turned unfathomable as he replied, "Ximen? Haha, a youth is still a youth after all, still so inexperienced. To think that you still cannot guess this young noble's identity. The Ximen family definitely lacks successors." Ling Tian purposefully paused at the inexperienced word, as though poking fun at him. Hearing Ling Yan's words, a hint of fear appeared in Ximen's face, and he quickly lowered his head. Ling Tian harshly coughed once, only to see him raise his head quickly, with disbelief on his face. "You are Ling Tian?" Ling Tian laughed out loud, displaying an incomparable arrogance as he replied, "That's right. I am Ling Tian. Your eldest young master, Ximen King's bosom buddy." Ling Tian. As he spoke, a hint of hostility wafted out from him. All the experts of the Ximen family immediately developed a trace of fear in their eyes. All their elite troops that the Ximen house sent to Skybearing mysteriously disappeared, and everyone knew that this was Ling Tian's doing. The two families could be said to have an irreconcilable blood feud. However, regarding Ling Tian's vicious methods and his strength, both only left the Ximen house in much fear. The moment they heard that the person standing in front of them was him, all of them only had a heavy heart, afraid of the consequences. "Indeed, it's you." Ximen shot a gaze that was as sharp as a knife. "Even if it's you, what are you going to do about it?" Ling Tian only shook his head and smiled. "I've just allied with the Western Han General Han Taizhuan and wiped out the 400,000-strong army from Northern Wei. So you tell me, what do I want now?" "Ah." Ximen was stunned. After a long time, he spoke, but to his men's surprise, his question was, "Is your esteemed father all right?" A curious light passed through Ling Tian's eyes, but he still answered, "He's fine now. Thanks for asking." Ximen secretly let out a sigh of relief at this, and smilingly replied, "Indeed, heaven helps the worthy. When I first received the news of your father, I immediately rushed over, wanting to help. General Han. To think that you were able to arrive before me and ally with General Han, causing the Northern Wei to suffer a huge defeat, never to recover again. Haha, this is like the saying the affairs of the world are akin to chess, difficult to predict." Ling Tian solemnly nodded his head and spoke with a sighing tone, "That's right, all things in life are just like a game of chess, unable to be predicted. Just like how young noble Ximen has appeared here, isn't it an extremely unexpected incident?" Ximen laughed at this, his eyes turning into slits from his huge smile. "That's right, it was indeed unexpected." The two of them exchanged glances, laughing together. With the harmonious way that they were laughing, one would think that they were best friends. The experts in the Ximen family stared at each other, mystified over the conversation he was having with Ling Tian. However, they were extremely certain of one point, that their young noble was actually battling it out with Ling Tian in a game of wits. Since their young noble couldn't defeat Ling Tian in a battle, he chose to battle Ling Tian in a game of wits instead. Whichever side did not understand the other would then fall into a disadvantage. Ximen cupped his fists, laughing as he spoke. "If young noble Ling does not have any special requests, then this younger brother here will be rushing back to Western Han." Ling Tian thought fast, and smiled. "Since this young noble here feels so close with young noble Ximen, and we get together so well, how could you leave so hurriedly? My intention was actually to await the return of General Han, and meanwhile tidy up the supplies left behind by the war. However, I have something important to attend to and will need to rush back to Skybearing. General Han will only return much later, so I will have to trouble young noble Ximen to collect and bring the war supplies back to Western Han. Is that alright?" The moment Ling Tian spoke, expressions of joy appeared on the faces of the subordinates behind Ximen. While the processing of war supplies was a tedious task, it was a form of meritorious service. The moment they returned to their country, this merit would be shared among them. This group of people did not actually expect that by following Ximen out this time, they could actually have riches drop from the sky in front of them. If this idea did not come out of Ling Tian's mouth, they would have long gone insane over this thought. Now, they were just waiting to see how their young noble would deal with this, but all of them had on the same greedy look in their expressions. While Ximen did not reveal any change in expression, the pupils of his eyes shrank as he turned back to face Ling Tian. "Since young noble Ling says that the two of us have chemistry, then how could this Ximen not listen to your request? I can't possibly spoil young noble Ling's great matters just because of some trivial matters I have back at home." Ling Tian smiled in return. "That's right. I thank young noble Ximen for understanding." Both parties looked at each other and smiled, however, their smiles appeared a little weird this time, as though they had some tacit understanding. In Ximen's eyes, a look of gratitude and admiration could be seen. the same look that could be seen when Ling 19 and the rest looked at Ling Tian. Chapter 335, Obstructing One's Merits. Before they parted, something had happened. After Ximen and Ling Tian both cupped hands in farewell, Ling Chi had taken a step forward and greeted, "The young noble of the Ximen family certainly is good stuff, not only possessing an elegant bearing, but also very good looking, just like a young lady. No wonder that's why my house's young noble feels so much in common with you." This sentence caused the expressions of Ximen's subordinates to contort. Ling Chi seemed like he had met his mother-in-law but chose to address her as aunt instead. Other than trying to be funny and doing something pointless, he also sounded extremely offensive. Looks of fury appeared on a couple of their faces, but they wisely did not move for fear of Ling Tian's counterattack. Ximen chuckled, "This brother is overly praising me. To talk about favoritism from young noble Ling, how could I compare to the five of you? From this, I can see that the people in Skybearing are the best looking. Let's put it this way, the last time I went over to Skybearing, I met a very interesting friend called Dog Egg or whatever. After not meeting for such a long time, I wonder how he's doing now." As he spoke, Ximen let out a long sigh, and said with a reminiscing tone, "The past seems ethereal like wisps of smoke. I wonder how that Dog Egg is doing now. I remember that once in order to steal some chicken to eat, he even fell into a family's latrine pit." Ling Kai's face alternated between red and purple, and viciously stared at Ximen. "Young noble Ximen, who knows, you might also fall into a latrine pit one day yourself. Goodbye." Ximen burst out into laughter at this sentence. While the upper half of his sentence was venomous, the latter half was neither here nor there. However, this gave his subordinates the impression that their young noble had wit surpassing a normal human, and allowed them a good comeback. Thus, they did not bother to nitpick his words. Surprisingly, Ling Tian's temper was also extraordinarily good. Not only did he not rebut Ximen, but he ignored it. As Ling Tian brought Ling Chi and the others back to Yan County, Ling Tian had on a poker face but his eyes glittered with laughter. Obviously, his mood was excellent. However, Ling Chi seemed like a grouchy old person the entire journey, grinding his teeth and seeming very depressed. Ling Yan, Ling 19, and the others were also behaving abnormally, all rolling with laughter while on horseback, laughing so hard that their faces were cramping up. What happened to this group? Did they all go crazy? The truth was that Dog Egg was the name of Ling Chi when he was still a beggar. All those directly under Ling Tian would of course be aware of Ling Kai's most shameful point, which was also a taboo subject for him. How could Ling Chi not leave in anger after having that touchy subject unearthed? Could he even try to argue with Ximen? The reason why he did not dare to argue with Ximen, and also why Ling Tian did not interfere in the end, was because Ximen also went by another name, Ling 30. Ling 30 was involved in begging together with Ling Chi when they were young and was also one of the final 50 who made it past Ling Tian's training. Of course, he would be extremely familiar with such a matter. However, saying that Ling Tian treated Ling Chi and the others better compared to him, every word of this was from his heart and was full of naked jealousy. He himself would also kill to stay beside Ling Tian and accompany him, but of course, how his subordinates interpreted his words was another matter altogether. That year Ling Tian had sent Ling 30 over to the Ximen aristocratic family to be an undercover agent because he had a knack for covert operations. With his above-average intelligence, coupled with the intelligence reports he always got beforehand from Ling Tian, it didn't take long for him to be noticed by the Ximen family and he was adopted as a Ximen member. While he was named Ximen, it was only meant as a way to tie him to the family. However, now that Ling Tian had wiped out all the legitimate heirs of the Ximen family, this figurehead Ling 30 now had free reign, and had turned into the leading figure of the younger generation of the Ximen house. As to why Ling 30 seemed to have cultivation on par with the 5 Ling brothers that accompanied Ling Tian, This was due to a miraculous panacea that the Ximen family had. Consuming the pill would greatly boost one's prowess, but the side effect was that the user would be stuck forever below the Ling Tian stage, unable to further improve. However, with the great cyclic pellet that Ling Tian just gave to Ling 30, the nourishment provided by it should be able to eliminate any side effects in Ling 30's body, giving him a chance once more to improve. Today's matter was also out of Ling Tian's expectations, so while he was making his deal together with Han Taizhuan, he had already sent a messenger falcon out to bring an intelligence report to Ling 8, informing him to pass the message to Ling 30, bidding him to rush here by the next day. Ling 30 had thrown everything aside and rode through the night, finally reaching here on time as per the young noble's orders. While Han Taizhuan had left behind a vice-general as well as a few thousand troops to clear up the spoils of war, Ling Tian did not even bother with such small fry. He intended to pass on all the spoils of war to this new friend he met today, Ling 30. Ling Tian had two purposes in doing this. The first was to further cement Ling 30's position in the Ximen family, expanding his influence by improving his relations in the eyes of the Western Han imperial family as well as the army. After all, not everyone was worthy for Ling Tian to give away his rewards just like that. Ling 30's performance had always impressed Ling Tian, especially with the Battle of Wits previously. Not everyone would be able to do such a thing in an impromptu situation. Secondly, since Ling Tian had already understood that Han Taizhuan was a subordinate of the Yu family, why would he allow Han Taizhuan to swallow all the merits on his own? This was something Ling Tian needed to prevent at all costs. This move was obvious to all and Ling 30 got to take advantage of it for free. While he could be said to be courageous enough to go one-to-one against Ling Tian, he was still taking credit from the hard work that Han Taizhuan had put in. However, Ling Tian was certain that the Western Han family would remain silent and split at least half of the rewards to Ling 30. This was how a monarch would scheme. As long as the monarch of Western Han wasn't an idiot, he would definitely not allow Han Taizhuan, who commanded such a huge military force, to return with such huge merits. The territory obtained from the conquest this time was enough to cover half of Western Han's original territory. Based on such a merit, the imperial family had no reason not to reward nor confer a title to him. Having Ling 30 take half of the impact would be an unexpected joy for them. Not only would they be able to restrict Han Taizhuan, they could also allow the dying Ximen family, who had suffered great losses back in Skybearing, to recoup and become great once again. If there was anyone that would not be happy about that, it would probably only be Han Taizhuan, but that was not what Ling Tian cared about. Based on Ling Tian's conjectures, for Yu Manlu to give him such an effortless victory, this would mean that the Yu family had absolute confidence in taking over the entire Western Han. While this was only his hypothesis, but whatever the case, Ling Tian would still not allow more power and influence to land in Han Taizhuan's hands. He did not wish to see that scenario happen at all. As he thought about this, Ling Tian couldn't help but smile stupidly as he envisioned what would happen if the Ximen family were to make Ling 30 the successor of their family because of his merits. What a wonderful thing that would be, and how much time that would save him. As he finally calmed down, he noticed the other brats sneakily staring at him, trying to figure out what was on his mind. Ling Tian laughed it off by saying, "Inform Feng Mo to look after the surrendered soldiers well. Split them into a few sections to separately send them back into Skybearing. In addition, prepare a few extra horse carts with extra bedding to make them comfortable for my fathers and my journey back." Ling Chi nodded and nudged his horse ahead of the rest. What a sneaky guy, to take the chance to avoid all the people laughing at him. The dust should have settled down on both sides, but after we return, we will still have a lot to do. Ling Tian addressed his subordinates with a smile, but suddenly frowned as he thought, the enemies are already gone like the wind, but why do I still feel nervous? As though a torrential downpour is oncoming towards us? Is it a mistaken premonition? Or did I forget to calculate something? Shaking his head, he thought, forget it, the boat will go along with the current until it reaches the harbor. No matter what, I can probably afford a rest before the next event. Northern Wei had already exhausted their threats and was like a bird at the end of its flight. Now that Skybearing had been taken over by the Ling family, Ling Tian could finally relax a little. After being cautious for such a long time, even for someone as hardened as Ling Tian, he was already fatigued. Ling Tian felt like he finally deserved a rest. At least, he wanted to fully throw himself into cultivation, sitting aloof from the rest of the mortal world. Just that should be possible, right? Ling Tian thought to himself. However, Ling Tian was destined to be disappointed. How could a man be able to have everything going their way all the time? In this world, a legend as large as Ling Tian's had just begun to unfold, and his life, surging on this great momentum, had just opened a new chapter. In the Northern Wei Palace. In the dark of night, while everyone was sleeping, Wei Qingping suddenly jumped up from his bed as he screamed and shouted with his eyes closed, "No! No! Please please please! Woo wah woo! Don't kill me! Woo wah woo! Young noble Ling, no daddy Ling, granddaddy Ling, ancestor Ling, I beg you to let me go. I was wrong, please don't kill me." The palace maids stationed nearby all let out a sigh. Not again. What sort of stimulation had their crown prince undergone with this young noble surnamed Ling? Why was he so afraid of him? Even to the point of calling him an ancestor, how could this be the bearing of a monarch to be? Ever since Wei Qingping managed to escape with under the crazed protection of his guards, he had fallen ill with a high fever in which he had mumbled incoherent words for 3 whole days. In those 3 days, he continuously mumbled non-stop, grinding his teeth and cursing unceasingly. Sometimes they could hear him pleading for mercy. But the content of it all was similar, all only to one person, Ling Tian.
Thank you for your continued following. Please support us by subscribe to encourage our continued creation. And press the bell to notify new chapter from us. Thank you.